For this second problem, if you view or read the um, lecture notes that I uploaded in the LMS, the second problem is actually for coordinate axis na vertical. So I will just like to read the problem. So a small projectile is fired vertically downward into a fluid medium with an initial velocity of 60 meters per second. And due to the drag resistance of the fluid, the projectile experiences a deceleration of, so we have a given equation for your acceleration, that is A equals negative 0.4 v cubed meter per second squared, where v is in meters per second. What we need to determine is the projectile's velocity and position 4 seconds after it is fired. Okay? So for this problem, as shown here, ang answers are the velocity is 0.559 meters per second, meter per second downward, and position is 4.43 meters. So for this type of problem, this is actually a type of problem na the same gyapon sa first one, where the acceleration is not constant. Manuman dili man constant ang acceleration, it's quite obvious na ang given dire sa acceleration is naka-variable. Meaning equation which is equivalent to negative 0.4 v cubed. Okay, so since kabalo naman tayo na ang acceleration is not constant, so ang gamiton nato na kinematic equations are those three kinematic equations, the first three kinematic equations. So let us solve this second problem. Okay, so just solution for this problem. Di ba kung mag-solve ta o rectilinear kinematics ng problem, the same with the first problem last week, we start on establishing the coordinate system. So in this problem, given naman na nga to ang illustration, so the illustration shown below is the coordinate system sa ato ang projectile, sa atong bullet. So for this one, kaning akong gain circle, that is your coordinate system. And it shows here that the origin is actually on the surface of the water and ang motion niya is downward. Okay? So it means that kung mag-solve tag other geometric aspects of motion, could be the velocity, the acceleration, the position, and the displacement, ang iyahang motion will always be downward based on the illustration given on the problem. So for the first question, what we need to determine is the projectile's velocity. So what is the velocity 4 seconds after it is fired? Okay? So once we establish the coordinate system, we actually choose which among the three kinematic equations atong gamiton. So sa atong mga three kinematic equations, those are V is equal to Vs over dt, A is equal to dV over dt, and the last one is ADS is equal to VdV. So when you choose a kinematic equation, it depends on the unknown variable and the given sa imong problem. So atong problem natay acceleration. So first is we have the acceleration that is negative zero point 0.4 v cube. We have the time, which is we need to determine base the time na 4 seconds. And the unknown or the third variable now, which is the unknown, is the velocity. So the third variable, which is the unknown, is the velocity. So among the three kinematic equations, which among these three kinematic equations atong gamiton for us to solve the velocity? Is it the first, second, or third kinematic equation?
Second,
Second,
sir.
That is the
Second, sir.
second kinematic equation. Thank you very much for answering my question. Okay? Ganahan jud ko sa mga klase ko mag-participate. To be honest, like kung matigala bitaw mo na kanang um, akong boses kay kanang taas kayo, it doesn't mean na kanang suko ko ana ingana jud ko mag-discuss like with the pabundak na no. By the way, so we will choose the second equation for us to solve the velocity since it has the acceleration, the time, and the variable v, which is mao na tong pangitaon. So we choose the second kinematic equation. Okay, so that would be A. A is equal to dv over dt. And if ever you uh, chose already the equation na gamiton nimo pag-solve sa on a particular problem, sometimes kung mag-solve ta, we actually write the sense of direction, the positive sense of direction sa imong equation. So for this type of problem, since it is downward, we can actually consider downward as positive. So kung mag-solve ta ani, we actually write here this side equation downward as positive. So meaning ana, sa final answer, kung positive atong ma-come up, meaning ang iyang direction is downward. Okay? Pero pwede po sa upward ang inyong gamiton. Pero para at least mas dali siya sa atoang problem, especially based on the illustration, i-consider nato ang downward as a positive. Kay choice is arbitrary man. Ito pwede man good na sa imong pili sa sense of direction, the positive sense of direction. So, there is a problem nato ato ang downward is a positive. So, for this one, since second kinematic equation atong gigamit, we substitute the equivalent of A. So, ang A nato would be negative 0.4 V cube. So, that would be negative 0.4 V cube is equal to dV over dt. What happens here? Duwa na ka variables ang nabilin. These are the variables V and the T. And we rearrange the equations for us to determine the velocity of the projectile 4 seconds after it is fired. So we cross multiply, we combine the like terms or the same variables. So dt dire is equal to dv over negative 0.4 v cube. So in this equation, unsa man to pag-solve aning equation nato? How can we perform this equation?
Integral, sir.
Integral or integration. Tama?
Yes, yes.
Okay? Ano man integration? It's because same
Na ID sa kilid.
tapos
hindi sa
9
kilid ang unknown na variable nato na v. 'Di ba?
Yes, sir.
Since atong v nato is na ID, meaning we need to eliminate the d by using the integration. So that's why ang atong i-perform nato dire is by integration. And since integration man nato ang um, gamiton, wait lang guys. Since integration man natong gamiton, it you can actually choose either indefinite or definite integral. Okay? So again, kung indefinite, unsa tong indefinite, na siya plus c. Kung definite is na siya you actually substitute the values for the lower and the upper limit. So when you integrate both sides of the equation, so you integrate both sides, it depends kung indefinite or definite integral. So in this problem, para mas dali na to i-solve, kay kung mapansin niyo sa solution na kung gi-upload sa LMS, it is quite lengthy because what I did is I use indefinite integral, which is the plus c, and then I first determine the velocity at any time. So for that case, medyo taas or um, lengthy ang solution na kung gi-upload sa LMS. But in here, what I will consider is we use definite integral kung asa i-substitute nato diretso ang value sa lower and upper limit. Especially sa time nato. So instead na variable t ang atong gamiton, we substitute directly the final time, which is the 4 seconds. So we use the definite integral for us to solve this one. Okay, so just a solution, a consideration rather. So integral of dt is equal to integral of dv over negative 0.4 vq. Since we use definite integral, okay, para mas diretso na nato ma-determine ang projectile's velocity. So sa time, ang lower limit, pila ang lower limit sa time nato? What is the initial time sa ato ang
4
projectile?
seconds. 4 seconds.
4 seconds ba? O ba ng initial?
Yes, sir, 4 seconds.
4 seconds, lower limit?
Zero, sir?
Tapos
Zero.
final
Zero.
It is zero. Ang upper, which is the final time, mo na 4 seconds.
Ay,
Kaya
4
question man
seconds.
is, projectile's velocity 4 seconds after it is fired. So ang 4 seconds na to, mo na to ang final time, correct? And
yes, sir.
the initial time na to is zero. Okay, wala may gi-state diri sa problem kung unsa ang initial time. So we consider na ang time niya initially is zero. So that's why the lower limit na to is zero. And instead, di ato gamiton o isulat diri sa upper limit na the same ato gibuhat sa first example problem, diretso na to i-substitute ang value sa final time nato, which is the 4 seconds. Okay? For the velocity or the right side sa imong equation, what will be the initial velocity nato? Based sa problem.
60 meters per second.
60 meters per second. It is actually stated on the problem. Kani o? This one, akong underline. So that is 60 meters per second. And ang upper limit, which is the final velocity, is the unknown. So meaning what kabalo. So therefore, we represent it with the variable v. Okay? And also, when we solve the right equation, right side sa imong equation, since ang denominator nato is naka v cube, para mas dali nato i-integrate, we can actually isaka lang nato si v cube, and what happens, ang iyang exponent, instead of positive 3, mahimo na siya negative 3. So the other way for you to write this one, kaning right side of equation will be that is 60 again, v, and negative 1 over 0.4. Na naman negative 1 over 0.4, kay negative 0.4 man na siya, pwede man good nimo masak ang negative, since negative value man gihapon ang right side of your equation. And that would be v raised to the power of negative 3 dv. Okay? Okay, when you kanang isaka ang denominator, the exponent will change, the sign of the exponent will change. And for that, mas dali na to ma-integrate ang kaning right side sa imong equation. So we will now start to integrate this one. So the integration sa left side sa imong equation, that is the integration of dt is t. So that is t. That is 0, 4 is equal to negative 1 over 0.4. That is constant. So igawas lang nimo na siya. Over 0.4. And the integration sa imohang v negative 3 dv, that is v negative 3 plus 1. So that is negative 2 over negative 3 plus 1 gihapon. So that is negative 2. And the lower and upper limit, 60 v. So you just only simplify this one. So kaning sa left side, di ba, pag substitute nimo sa upper and lower limits, that is upper minus the lower. So that would be 4 minus 0. So pag substitute nimo aning 4 and 0 sa imong gisolve, which is the t, so that is upper minus the lower, itira man na siya, is equal to negative 1 over 0.4. The same thing, upper minus the lower. So ang upper nimo is v, so that would be negative v, negative v raised to the power of negative 2 over 2. Ano man gisaka lang nako ang negative kay since negative man siya, pwede man gud nimo ma-change ang position niya, pwede nimo isaka sa numerator. And sa minus the lower limit, so since minus and then napaman kay negative diri gikan sa 2, so mahimo naman siya positive. So that would be positive. Then substitute nimo ang lower limit, 60 raised to the power of negative 2 over 2. Okay, so we just only simplify this one. So 4 is equal to negative 1 over 0.4. So you just combine the two fractions since the same man ang denominator. So you just only combine the numerators. So negative v raised to the power of negative 2 plus 60 raised to the power of negative 2. Okay, so we just only simplify this one for us to solve the value of V. Okay, kay V naman ang nabilin na variable sa itong equation. Once we integrate and once we substitute the value of the final time, which is the 4 seconds. So for us to determine the velocity 4 seconds after it is fired, we just simplify this equation. Toto buhaton is we rearrange, we cross multiply. Dire lang nako sa kilid isulat. So that would be 4 0.4 times 2 is equal to negative. You just only multiply it with each term. So that would be V negative 2 minus, pila nga to, minus siya kay tungod na pa may negative diri sa negative 1. So pag multiply sa 60 raised to the power of negative 2, may mo na siya negative balik. So what would be the value of 60 raised to negative 2? Ilang value, ana? Uy, ang calculator, basin nagkuha pa ata ni sila calculator ba? O pila man ng kuan? 60 raised to the power of negative 2. Pila? That is unsa ang kuan other in fraction. Ano bang answer? Yes, that is 1 over 3,600. Actually, 3,600 or 2.78 times 10 to the power of negative 4 according to Gera na nasa chat box. Okay? So you can actually write using exponential or kanang kagani exponential ba ang term na? Scientific form dahil scientific form and fraction. So any of the form ang pwede ninyo gamiton. Pero sometimes ako amang god kung naay siya fraction mas okay sa kong fraction kay para mas simple. So actually the answer for that is 1 over 3,600. So you just only transfer the negative 1 over 3,600 to the other side. So that would be V negative 2 is equal to pilaning 4 times 0.4 times 2 plus 1 over 3,600. Pila na siya? Hindi na ko isulat ang tanan. Ilang value na to ana? When you transpose the negative 1 over 3,600 then i-add sa 4 times 0.4 times 2.
3,600.32.
Ilang answer?
Ay, wait lang, sir. Wait lang.
3.20, sir.
3.20. 3.20. Kasi namali lang og input sa calculator. 3.20. Yeah. Actually, 3.2002777. So, 3.200. So, kana, masolve na nato si V square, si V, the velocity rather. So, Ang v squared, ang pasabutan na, that is 1 over v squared is equal to 3.200. And just a continuation on this, continuation, 1 over v squared is equal to 3.200. So, ibaliktad lang nimo ang koan para at least ang ipangita man naton dire is ang velocity. So, what happens if you interchange the position? So, this will become v squared is equal to 1 over 3.200. Then, after you rearrange the position, you determine the square root each side of the equation. So what happens? That would be v is equal to, since it is square root, dua ang values nato, that would be positive and negative. So pila man nato ang square root? 1 over 3.200. 1 over 3.200.
5590. 90.
5.559. Okay. 0. Tama ba itong answer? Answer? Di ba 0.559 mo ang answer kanina?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ang question, since the since we use square root, di ba kung square root, do man ka values, positive and negative. Which among the two values atong gamiton? Is it the positive 0.559 or the negative 0.559? Positive? Sige. Ano man positive? Sige, go. Ayaw mo
Negative.
ka.
Negative, sir.
Ay, wait. Ang imo answer kanina kay positive. Positive yung answer kanina. Nga naman positive. Sige, go. You can, sige, explain briefly nga nung positive.
Okay.
Or anyone.
Ako, sir. Positive.
Okay, Kera.
Since nag-assume man ta na pa downward, positive.
Okay, that is correct. Since we assume that downward is positive, therefore, ang value na gamiton nato is the positive value. Eh kung negative, it means ang atong final answer would be 0.559 meter per second down upward. Eh negative man atong gigamit. But since downward man ang motion sa atong projectile, so atong gamiton na answer dire is positive 0.559 nawala ko. Makadug na mo sa ko, ah. Kay nalobat ang akong isa ka phone. So, nag-change ko
Yes,
sa
sir.
akong nag-change ko sa isa ka gadget. But anyway, asa ko to the pit. Like what I've said, like what Gera said, positive ato gamiton because at first, sa ato ang kinematic equation, diri sa ato ang pag-assume sa positive direction, downward nato is positive. So therefore, sa atong final answer, since we have two answers, positive and negative, atong gamiton is the positive value because it represents the downward direction. The negative represents the upward direction. So take note on that, ha. So our final answer, which is the velocity or the projectile's velocity, will be positive 0.559. So that would be V is equal to 0.559 meters per second. So that is V is equal to positive. And ang pasabot sa positive nato is downward ang iyang direction. Kano man importante ang naay direction because again, velocity is a vector quantity. So when we consider vector quantity, it has both magnitude. Ang magnitude niya is 0.559 and the direction is downward. So that will be your final answer for your velocity, the projectile's velocity 4 seconds after it is fired. Okay? Do you have any question on the velocity so far? Sa velocity? Nasabtan?
Yes, sir. Sometimes, sir.
Okay. Ang pagsulat nako clear. Clear lagi no, murag nagkuan lagapon ko. But anyway, so no question so far. Can I proceed to the next part? The position? Can I proceed to the next part, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Uy, na may nagkuan.
Yes, sir.
Taga na. Party. Anyway, so the next part is finding the position. Okay, so for the position, so since we determined already the velocity 4 seconds after it is fired, so the next would be what would be the position. So that would be B, the position. And for the position, unsang given nato, we have the acceleration that is negative 0.4 gihapon, V cube. Time, which is the 4 seconds. And ang unknown nato, which is the position S. Okay? So we go back again to the three kinematic equations. We have V is equal to ds over dt. A is equal to dv over dt. A ds is equal to v dv. So from the given variables for finding the position, which among these three kinematic equations ang gamito nato?
Third.
Third, nga naman who
First
answered
og third, sir. First og third.
unsa?
First og third. Third, sir.
First or third? Kisa to nag-answer og first or third? It was you. Isa to? Uy, ayaw mo kahadlok-hadlok.
Ay, sir, kaya mo sa acceleration ng willcount.
Oh, actually, pwede third. Pwede po sa first. Nga naman, pwede man first.
Na
Dito
may
mo,
DS. May
um,
DS.
ang buhaton magod nimo is since naman siya S and naman siya T, and since ang V nato, ang buhaton nato ana is ay wait lang. Um ay dili dili gihapon magamit ang first one kay wala man day equivalent sa V. Even though ikuan nimo siya rearrange nimo ang A is equal to negative 0.4 V cube. So ang best choice jud dire sa tulo ka equation is the third one. Nga naman the third one. Actually it is actually the third kinematic equation. It is actually the third kinematic equation because you have the acceleration given, S that is the unknown, and V which is um mas na-solve naman nato kanina. So ang time nato kahit walay time, it will be represented with the velocity itself. Okay? So since or kahit walay time ang third kinematic equation nato, it will be represented with the velocity or with the variable velocity nato. So we choose the third kinematic equation for us to solve the position. Okay? Kay kung first di na to ma-solve ang koan. Actually, kahit pa makuan na to, ma-substitute na to ang koan. Ang sa V is kung if ever atong gi-solve kanina kay naka-velocity at any time, kung ang atong na-solve kanina is the same atong sa first sample problem na gibuhatan nato siya as a velocity at any time, kato pwede nato magamit ang first equation. Pero since nagdiretso naman ta, wala naman nato giparehas sa first example problem. So the other way for you to solve the position is using the third kinematic equation. So let us use the third kinematic equation. So that would be A ds is equal to V dV. So the same thing, A nimo is negative 0.4 V cube ds is equal to V dV. So ang V nimo is as is lang, wala kay substitute, as is lang siya. So what happens here? Two variables ang nabilin dire, and you just rearrange the equation. So that would be ds is equal to V dV over negative 0.4 V cube. Okay? So ako gibuhat, gi-divide na ako siya og negative 0.4 V cube. Then, simplify pa na ako siya. So ma-cancel out ang isa ka V nato. So this would be V squared. So the simplified form would be ds is equal to dv over negative 0.4. Wait lang. So what happens here? That would be ds is equal to dv over negative 0.4 v squared. So, the same lang atong gibuhat kanina sa velocity, di ba? So, if you notice, the equation is quite the same of what we did on the velocity. So, let us solve this one. Just a continuation on the position. Continuation. So again, that was ds is equal to dv over negative 0.4 v squared. So unsa na to pag-solve ani? The same gyapon sa first one atong kanina, di ba? it is using integration since atong gipangita is ang position, and since ang position nato is 9D, so this is a position differential. Naka-DS pa man siya, so we need to integrate this for us to determine the position, the projectile's position 4 seconds after it is fired. So when you integrate each side of your equation, integrate. So when you integrate again, it could be by using indefinite or definite integral. So ang atoa gamiton lang nato diretso using the definite integral instead of indefinite, or by finding the position at any velocity para mas ang atong ma-come up na answer is diretso nag-answer na position. So for the position, unsang iyahang initial position nato? What will be the lower limit? What will be the value sa ato ang lower limit nato or the initial position based sa problem?
Zero.
It is still 0. Nga naman 0? Because it starts with the origin. Diba? Kung talawan ninyo sa illustration, dire sa kilid, o kali sa baba rather, it starts with the origin. So therefore, ang ato ang lower limit is 0. The upper limit is S, or with the variable S, kay wa man ta kabalo kung unsang iyang position 4 seconds after it is fired. For the velocity, unsang iyang initial velocity nato? Still 60? 60 pa rin. How about the final velocity?
Isang 0.50.
O, atong kanina, 0.559. Kay tungod, since wala may time atong i-consider, dire, ang velocity ang mag-represent sa time, which is the 4 seconds. Kay mo man atong gi-solve na velocity for time equal to 4 seconds. So ang final velocity when time is equal to 4 seconds is 0.559. Tama ba? 0.559, no? I will just check kung tama ba. Yeah, 0.559. So upper limit nato is 0.559. So the same thing, ato gibuhat, we can rewrite this equation. So pwede na to isa kaning v squared. So that would be integral of ds gihapon with the upper and lower limits. Then for this one, 60.559 negative 1 over 0.4 v negative 2 dv. Okay, so we will now perform integrating this equation. The left side, integration, integral of ds is s. So that would be s 0s. And sa right side, since negative 1 over 0.4 is a constant, you just only igawas lang nimo na siya because it is a constant. So negative 1.4 so the integral of v negative 2 dv, that is v. So negative 2 plus 1, that would be negative 1 over negative 1 gihapon. So that is the integral sa v raised to the power of negative 2 dv, and its lower and upper limits is 60.559. Okay, so we substitute the upper and lower limits. Upper minus the lower, so that would be s minus 0. So s minus 0 equal to Negative 1 over 0.4. So upper minus the lower, so that would be negative. Okay, since over negative 1 man siya, pwede man lang nimo isaka and still, and since ang iyang denominator is 1, so you can write this in this way. So that would be negative 0.559. 0.559 is our upper limit minus the lower limit, and since naman kay over negative 1, may mo man siya positive, and your lower limit is 60 negative 1. Okay? So pilang kaning nasa sulod sa parenthesis nato, kaning gi-substitute nato ang 0.559 and 60. Pila na sila? Then i-multiply sa negative 1 over 0.4. Para ang atong answer, since 0 naman diri sa s minus 0, since 0 naman ni siya, s na lang mabiling diri sa left side. So pila atong answer diri sa right side nato?
Four point 51, sir. 4.51.
4.51.
51.
4.51? Ngano 4.51? Okay. So di ba kuan man na siya 0.559
4.43.
negative 1 times negative 1 plus
4.43.
4.43, sir.
4.43. Basin pag
4.43.
4.43, 4.431. Di ba kay 4.4306 man. So
Ay, 4.43 days, sir.
4.43. Okay, so the answer would be 4.43 meters. Okay, so mo na ang iyahang position when the time is 4 seconds. Okay, so say definition sa position, it measures from where? Asa yung measurement? It measures from ang position na to?
Perfect.
When you define position, asa ang iyang measurement? It is from the asa ang unsang definition sa position? It measures from the
Right.
Uy, nakalimot na unsay koan, unsay definition.
Point of origin.
Point of origin. 'Di ba kung position, what I've discussed last time, ang pasabot ning 4.43, it is a measurement from the origin. So, unsa ang iyahang distance from the origin mismo? Okay, since it starts from the origin, and after 4 seconds, ang iyahang position ana from the origin will be 4.43 meters. Okay? And nakoy question. Di ba napansin ninyo, ang initial velocity niya is 60 meters per second. Pero pag final, which the time is 4 seconds, is 0.559 meters per second. Ngano ni gamay? Unsay pasabot ana? Ni hinay or ni kusog?
Decelerates.
Accelerate.
Decelerate. Decelerate.
Nag-decelerate. Tama? Kay tungod,
Yes.
kay kung if you notice manggod, kung nagaligo mo sa dagat, as you go deeper, di ba nagahinay ang inyohang pagdihok? So it is actually the same of what happened. Mao nang pasabot sa technical judgment. Di ba na-gets ninyo akong gidiscuss last time? So tama jud ang 0.559 because in reality, the value nato must be lower than or must be lower compared to its initial velocity. So from 60 meters per second, kailangan mas baba pa sa 60 meters per second. Kay as an object goes deeper in water, nagahinay ang iyahang velocity. Okay? Nagahinay ang iyahang lihok. Okay? Decelerate ang gingon ninyo. So that is why it is 0.559 meters per second. Okay? Nag-gets ninyo tong koan, tong akong gi-explain na technical judgment. Do you have any question on this second sample problem so far? Question so far?